Good evening, everyone. How are you? So this is the first reading of The Hub by my alter ego, Joni Daniels writer. So I'm going to start in a couple of minutes. I'll wait and see if anybody hops on. If not, you can watch this on replay. So I think I created the event. Not sure how many people are able to come, but so literally it's just turned 7 o'clock. It's a really miserable night out there, so get yourselves wrapped up, get a cup of whatever you fancy, little alcoholic beverage if you want. Hi Vicky, get snuggled up, and I'm going to start reading in a moment. I'm just going to wait. I've got 3 people on at the moment. Hi Vicky, hi Amy, thank you for joining me. Now we'll see how it goes. I'm aiming to read for an hour. I hope that's okay. If not, if you start getting fed up, just pop in chat and I will go again. But we'll see how far we get. I mean, it might be that, you know, we've all had enough by 7:30. We'll see. So you've seen me and heard me talk about my book, The Hub. This is the first version that was self-published, and this is the second version where I had a publisher who have since ditched me, so it's going to go back to that one. I need to just sort that out on Amazon. It is available on Kindle at the moment. You'll put this on as you go to bed later. It'll be perfect. Oh, thanks Amy, thank you very much. So I'm going to read from the newer version because it's got, hi Lisa, because it's got the acknowledgements in the front, and this just says how the book came about. So a bit about me. I studied for my degree in humanities, specialising in creative writing and classical studies with the Open University, and graduated from the Barbican in September 2014. Passion for music, particularly Duran Duran. Hi Joe, hi Lynn. And classical history, they figure heavily in my daily life. I live with my family in the seaside town of Sutton-on-Sea on the east coast of Lincolnshire, not far from Skegness. Everyone's heard of Skegness, which incidentally is not in Scotland. Okay, so let's start off with the dedication. To all my guides in this world and the next, thank you for your constant support. You lead with love, I follow with love, and that's all you need. Acknowledgements. The Hub came about as a result of tragedy. My husband Nigel and I had spent 3 years looking after my beautiful mum, who sadly lost her life to a brain tumour in June 2015. She passed away on a warm summer evening at home, the moment that Nigel finished mowing her beloved lawn, happy, I believe, in the knowledge that he had done a good job. We'd only been married the previous year, so we began our life then as a couple rather than an odd little trio. Hi Andrea. I'm not going to read out all the comments while I'm reading because it's going to interrupt the flow. So just to let you know, I am going to look at the comments after and acknowledge everyone. And I'm so grateful that you're here and thank you. But I just don't want to interrupt the flow of the reading. I'm still doing the acknowledgements at the minute. And then we'll get into the flow of the book. From the moment I start reading the book, then I won't be reading comment. Well, I won't be acknowledging comments. Okay, thank you. We spent the weeks and months afterwards grieving for her and yet moving on, as I know she would have wanted. That Christmas we had planned a New Year's Eve party, and it was on the 27th of December that Nigel went off to play with his friends, racing their motorbikes at an organised event on the beach. It was a crisp, sunny winter day. The sky was bright blue, a day to enjoy breathing in the clean sea air. I decided to stay at home and do a thorough clean, getting everything ready for the celebrations. I had just sat down for a sandwich and was singing along to A Spoonful of Sugar with Mary Poppins when my phone rang. I picked it up seeing Nigel's picture, smiling to myself that he would be home soon. I knew in that instant that something terrible had happened. It wasn't his voice that answered, but that of his best friend. Time stood still as he relayed the awful news that my beloved husband had had an accident. The events in the Hub are based on this true story, but at the time I wasn't ready to tell it exactly as it happened. So I altered the accident to happen to the main character, Kate. Based on myself, having ridden competitively in endurance horse riding for many years. Sat in the waiting room outside the intensive care ward, our lives in tatters, relying on the fabulous staff at Hull Royal Infirmary to bring him back to us was horrific, something I would not wish on my worst enemy. The doctors all called him Miracle Man, and now, although partially sighted, suffering from anxiety and with a brain injury, he is and we are going from strength to strength, individually and as a couple. We still have the odd day where it's so hard, but I'm proud of him and how far we have come since those dark days. We're getting stronger with every day that passes. Kate's experiences are based on my own experiences dealing with mental illness, in which I spiralled upwards, not knowing how to deal with all the information I was being given and being ripped away from my family. My life now in the hands of others, some caring and wonderful, some sadly preying on the weak and vulnerable. I have seen both sides of the mental health system and now count myself as a survivor rather than a victim. Thanks go to the wonderful friends and paramedics at the beach who were first on the scene of the accident, then to the guys of the Links and Knots Air Ambulance, and of course the fabulous staff at Hull Royal Infirmary Intensive Care Unit, who undoubtedly, along with Nigel's own determination and the support of thousands of well-wishers, all combined to bring him back to us. Thanks to those at Rape Crisis for their counselling service, and to my psychiatrist who, after knowing me for nearly 2 years now, appears to take my experiences on board. Thanks to our dear friends and close family who all rallied round. You know who you are, especially our wonderful children who saw things they shouldn't have seen and coped with situations which must have been very frightening for them. Thanks to Jeff, my original editor, who asked if I had an aversion to commas and was I mad? Your harsh critique made me work even harder on my manuscript. Your words inspired me when you emailed after the edits to say it was prize-winning material. I live in hope. Massive thanks to, I'm not going to say their name because they don't make the publishers, for loving the hub and supporting me in my quest to reach a larger audience. I had to write this book. I could not keep it inside my head. I have a voice and I'm speaking on behalf of myself and countless others who may feel that nobody cares. The stigma of mental illness is still with us, but I hope that with books like this and the support of many others who work tirelessly to raise awareness, the sheer agony of battling with this illness will enable our voices to be heard. And the essay I include at the end of the hub is one which I wrote as part of my degree back in 2011. I had no idea at the time that Aphrodite would play such a massive role in the events which led me to being hospitalised. So that's the acknowledgements. So that's a little bit of understanding from where the book sprang from. So forward, The Hub is a novel which deals with the difficult subject of mental illness and the thin line that we as humans tread as we go through our lives. Nobody knows how they will cope under extreme pressure and what their breaking point may be until it actually happens. The future is not ours to predict, thank goodness. This story, my debut novel, is based on true events of people known to me. Although based on the truth, I've used artistic licence to weave a fictional story. Names, places and events have been changed to suit the narrative. And again, I've included an essay for interest at the back of the book which traces the goddess Aphrodite throughout antiquity to the present day. Just going to grab a quick drink. Prologue. The radio provides its usual accompaniment to my daily routine. The familiar voice of a local DJ washes over me as I sit staring blankly at the page glowing bright white on my laptop. I have written "Dear Sir" over an hour ago, and that's the result. 2 words. I cannot go any further. It's just a letter, yet it's more than that. It's an attempt to bring some semblance of justice back to the living hell I escaped from. What might be called by some closure. I don't know if it would do any good, but I have to try. I have to try, for my sake, for the sake of my family, and for the sake of the ones I left behind. I am safe. I have to keep reminding myself that the worst is over. I'm home. As long as I keep my end of the bargain and take the tablets I've been prescribed, they won't send me away again. My hot chocolate has gone cold, and I know that my husband will be back soon. He and the rest of the family are so protective towards me. They never leave me alone for very long. For the first time since I came home, I'm enjoying my own company. I know he won't be long, maybe an hour or so, and that gives me comfort too. I'm not scared, I know he won't let me down. He's gone to do the food shopping, he does mostly everything now. He's become self-sufficient whilst I've been away. That's how we refer to it now in the family, whilst you were away. It's our code, and it's much easier to say whilst you were away than whilst you were sectioned or whilst you went crazy. And it's definitely easier to say whilst you were away than to contemplate the truth whilst you were locked up, drugged and abused. Nobody wants to say those words because that makes it real. Need a drink. Kettle on again, more hot chocolate. I've developed a sweet tooth since I've been home. I think it's a comfort thing. The rich milky drink is like nectar. The chill that has settled in my bones is starting to ebb. 4 weeks ago they ripped me away from everything I loved. I was supposed to be going away to get better. To focus on getting better and not trying to solve everyone's problems. I thought I would never see my beautiful home and family again. The laptop screen has gone black. The little blue light on the keyboard flashes, beckoning me. For a moment, I'm transported back to that place. The place where colours were sent as signs to guide me, to keep me safe. Blue could go either way and meant be careful. I look around in awe, I am safe. I am in my kitchen. Nothing is going to harm me. I used to take this for granted. How many of the friends I left behind will ever see their homes again? The thought spurs me on, I have to do this. I owe it to them, I owe it to myself, and I owe it to future patients who may find themselves in my situation. Deep breath. I tap a button on the keyboard and the screen lights up, cursor flashing where I left it ready, waiting for my words to spill the truth about the hub. Dear Sir. Kate, the origins. I was born in 1967 during the Summer of Love, where hippies fueled by hallucinogenic drugs preached of free love and peace from the warmth of California. In the UK, their contemporaries followed suit, adorned in paper flowers, flowing multicoloured garments and Afghan coats. California dreamers of Woodstock doing their thing in a slightly cooler climate across the pond. The Beatles were at #1 with All You Need Is Love, and my family were happy with their new arrival. A new reality had been delivered to them that day, a Leo child, a little girl with a strong will who shared her birthday with many other strong personalities, people well known in their chosen profession. Mick Jagger, Helen Mirren, Stanley Kubrick had all made their first appearances on planet Earth on this day in history. As well as new souls being ushered into this world, on this day throughout history, to keep the balance, there were others who left behind their mortal coils to move on to the next level. A number of significant figures throughout the history of the world. Offa, King of Mercia, Atahualpa, the Inca ruler overthrown by Pizarro, Eva Perón in 1952, all leaving their mark and helping us to shape the future, as do we all in our own ways. Each and every soul has a purpose and a destiny to fulfil. My parents were of a different generation. They already had their children who were now in their teens, and the appearance of another baby had been of great surprise to the rest of the family. By the age of 2, I had beautiful blonde Shirley Temple curls and a volatile temperament. When I was good, I was indeed a model child, but when I was bad, I would throw tantrums of epic proportions. A penchant for banging my head on the concrete floor repeatedly was a worrying trait, but I did not seem to suffer any ill effects from this behaviour, although some might say that this may have had some bearing on events in later life, or at least indicated a sign of things to come. For such a young child, I developed an unusual love of history on holidays, dragging my parents into every museum I could find, to the point where distraction tactics of bribery suites were deployed. Nobody knew or bothered to ask why I was so fascinated with antiquity at such a tender age. It was just another symptom of my boundary-pushing behaviour. Always a pain in the arse, I would be found standing between crenellations on the top of a high castle, looking down to see what was on the other side. On one occasion, falling into a waterfall when curiosity and a yearning to join my granddad on the slippery stones near the edge was too much temptation to resist. A postcard home followed, recounting the tale with much raising of eyebrows and tutting ensuing. Nobody expected anything but trouble from the feisty little girl. Back home, I liked balancing my way along the floor-wide ledge outside my bedroom window, practicing dance moves and wobbling fearlessly with eyes tight shut and pushing limits I didn't even know existed. A goddess in training. a source of constant aggravation for ageing earthly parents who really should have, by this time, been out and about enjoying child-free weekends away and holidays relaxing or rambling, normal pursuits for a couple in their late 40s. In school, I was bright, lively and popular, always into one scrape or another, with many friends, some of whom became friends for life and remain in contact till present time. As a teenager, the local grammar school had no clue how to handle high spirits and antics. I followed my heart, not my head, and broke every rule the stuffy school tried to impose. Too much makeup, too many earrings, hair bleached, then in turn dyed purple or red, skirt too short, smoking. The list was endless, as were the letters home, some of which made it to home to my parents. Most find themselves confined to the bottom of my school bag. They labelled me a rebel and left me to it. A sad reflection of the poor teaching methods common in the 1980s. Many of the school staff were near to retirement age. My friends and I could not wait to get out there fast enough, and as soon as exam leave began, that was the end of my grammar school education as far as I was concerned. They'd failed me and I left with nothing but a handful of O-levels and a scathing report. My parents were pleasantly surprised when I excelled in college, went on to complete a degree in classical studies. The keen interest in ancient history and mythology has stayed with me throughout my life. May go some way to explaining as to why when the chips were really down, my brain turned to familiar subjects of which I was passionate about to utilise as a coping strategy when the shit really hit the fan. The Prophecy. Summer 2015. So it began. I had fair warning of what was to come in the future, but I chose to ignore it. It was a beautiful summer's day, and I'd visited the stables as I did every day. Nothing strange about that. My beloved horse Ebony and I had been out on the beach once again. It was our favourite place, perfect for blowing away cobwebs. My beautiful Ebony, coat brushed so she shone jet black, gleaming muscles rippling under the sun, tossed her mane and whinnied with pleasure as we galloped along the shore without a care in the world. The smell of the sea air rushing by was making my nostrils flare and eyes water. We raced seabirds as they flew alongside us, cawing, their cries carried by the wind until we left them far behind. Sand flew up, sticking to her powerful limbs, only hoofprints left behind to show our journey, only to be washed away again by the inevitable ebb and flow of the tides. Ebony and I enjoyed each other's company. We were best friends. She knew all my secrets. She was a friend and confidant. I was her protector, her comforter, the human who cared for her every need. We had a solid bond and made a good team. We competed in long-distance riding events and travelled all over the country in pursuit of ribbons and trophies, meeting others engaged in the same pastime. We cantered through forest trails, over moors, on bridleways and paths less taken, enjoying every second and never knowing what was round the corner. But it was here on the sand that we felt most at home and free. The morning had been the same as any other. All stable duties done, my lovely Ebony's black glossy coat brushed, white stockings cleaned of the sand which stuck grittily to the feathers around her hooves. Ebony, with her long black lashes and white blaze, whinnied at me, and turning abruptly, kicked up her heels, tossed her mane and let fly. Happy in her freedom, she cantered and bucked with joy as she left me watching her from the field gate, looking for a suitable place to roll and stretch after our morning exercise. I loved this horse as unconditionally as any parent loves a child, and watched with pride as she cantered out into the field, snorting and whinnying to her friends who had been left behind waiting for their respective owners. Sorry, miss my horse. 1 second. See you later, gorgeous, I called after her as I closed the gate and headed to the tap room to put her saddle and bridle away. It was still early morning, all yard chores done, and I felt a rush of pride at our progress. The training was going well, and our competitive long-distance rides had been successful so far. Is that you on your way then? I can't do an Irish accent, sorry. I saw Adam, the yard manager. It was him who interrupted my daydreaming. He was striding towards me, carrying a large bag of feed. Here you go, they dropped this off with my order yesterday. Said I'd make sure you got it. Thanks, Adam, that's good of you. Yeah, I'm heading home now, no rest for the wicked. I grinned back at him. What are you up to today? Just off to the sales, I'm looking for another coloured cob, and I heard on the grapevine that there may be some travellers turn up with some Irish stock, he replied. Hey, why don't you come with me? I could do with some advice if I'm going to find something decent to enter into the sand race this year. Love to, but I've got a date with an old school friend. I haven't seen her for years, so I better not. Thanks though, maybe I'll join you next time. See you later. Good luck with your hunt, I called over my shoulder as I exchanged yard boots for my battered Converse. Adam was such a nice guy. We had always had a connection and hit it off from the moment we met. I could sense it when we spoke. I knew him from old, but how? We often exchanged glances and caught each other looking inquisitively when we thought the other was not paying attention. When our eyes met, there was a jolt of recognition that remained unexplained. I was sure there was something deeper there, and I knew that we both felt it. It puzzled me. It was as though I'd known him forever, even though we had only met a year ago when I had to move Ebony to new stables. It was better left unspoken. We settled for mutual appreciation and friendship. It was far too complicated to let things go any further. No, things were better left unsaid. Still, it didn't hurt to appreciate a nice-looking member of the opposite sex, did it? What harm was there in looking? He was a handsome man with hair as black as my Ebony's coat, long dark lashes, framed eyes the colour of rich dark chocolate. He was slightly built, sinewy, used to the heavy lifting that goes hand in hand with anything to do with horses. He told me how when he was younger he'd been quite successful as a jockey and a well-known part of the racing fraternity back at home. Those days were long behind him, and he'd come over from Ireland to help out relations with their busy yard and ended up staying, gradually taking on more and more responsibilities until they handed the reins over to him completely last year. He was full of ideas and had started as he meant to go on. The yard was now a bustling place, always running at full capacity and with a growing waiting list for an empty stable. Adam was a godsend for many reasons. No matter how we felt, I was determined I was not going to, I hope there's no kids watching, up, another marriage. I was no longer free and single, so whatever feelings lurked under the surface, they could stay exactly where they were, hidden and locked away where they could do no harm to anyone. I already had one divorce behind me, and I didn't intend to add another one to my little black book of failed relationships. There were countless failed relationships in that particular book, more than enough to fill its pages twice over. I don't believe in regret. I believe things happen for a reason. Sure, I feel bad that people have been hurt in the past as I bounced from one guy to another and back again, but that was back in the day. Pick yourself up, get up, show up, get the fuck on with it. I told myself off if I felt my resolve starting to weaken. Suck it up, buttercup, was a mantra I used when there was nothing to be done but get on with it. Fall in love easily. My heart's been broken and mended more times than I care to admit. I was 45 before I finally met my match. The relationship had come out of the blue, passionate, unexpected, a roller coaster ride. The yin to my yang, boom, with a libido that not only matched mine but sometimes overtook it. I'd never been happier. In less than a year, I found myself saying I do for the second time in my life, and since then I'd never looked back. 4 years later, I've remained faithful, as had he, a fact which surprised the pair of us given our respective track records. As I turned the ignition, bringing the engine to life, I sat for a moment breathing in the warm, sweet air. A mixture of fresh hay, sugar beet and manure filtered through from the yard, familiar and comforting. Life didn't get much better. With a broad grin on my face, I put the roof down and the music up, full blast. I drew away from the yard and set off. "You be careful now," Adam shouted after me as I left. Always, I answered and winked mischievously. Well, a little flirting didn't hurt, and it put a smile on both our faces. I caught him reflected in my rearview mirror, shaking his head as he turned and went back to his daily chores in the yard. Duran Duran, my constant musical companions, provided the tunes for my short journey back home. The yard was just 10 minutes away, another reason in my choice of livery for my equine friend. "Reach up for the sunrise," I yelled to the world at the top of my voice. I sped through the countryside towards home, accompanied by my boys. As a product of the 60s, I'd grown up with the sound of music playing every day on our old radio in the kitchen as my mother baked cakes or made pastry. A whiter shade of pale, Puppet on a String, then Ed Stewart on Radio 1, request shows, The Carpenters, The Osmonds, quirky comedy songs by Benny Hill or Terry Scott. The sounds of my childhood, the sound of happiness, music, and the smells of freshly baked bread filling the kitchen. Bread waiting to be topped with homemade luscious jam crammed with whole succulent strawberries. I had had a wonderful childhood, even though I'd not been an easy child. My parents gave me a solid upbringing, never gave up on me despite my antics, which had them pulling their hair out. I suppose they'd always hoped that I would turn out all right, as my brother and sister had done before me. I was just a different generation, one on my own and in between. My cousins were all of the same age as my elder siblings, and consequently I was raised more as an only child, with the others having fled the nest when I was still a small child. Being in between, I had the luxury of having siblings without having to live with them. And by the time they had children and their children had grown, I was the in-between generation cool auntie who was invited to parties of the generations either side of my own. I was in fact someone who could mix with all ages of the family and feel comfortable in either situation, a born socialiser. My formative years were lived in the 80s, punk, new wave, new romantics and the age of synthesisers joined the more traditional sounds of drum and guitars. The Sex Pistols, Adam and the Ants, my Duran boys, I loved them all. I love music, always had, always will. I point blank refuse to be categorised into one genre. Music is life. I know that I cannot live without it, or at least, the very least, I am sure that I would shrivel up and die without a song or a lyric to lift me up to higher levels and make my soul sing. Drove home that day in a haze of happiness. My right foot hit the pedal to the metal and I sped along in my comfort zone, cocooned in utter bliss. Roof down with the sun blowing down and singing in harmony with Simon Le Bon to Planet Earth. I rounded a sharp right-hand bend, tyres only leaving a small amount of rub behind on the tarmac. As I did, a voice shouted in my ear and rudely interrupted my journey home. "Dead by Christmas!" He screamed into my ear. For a moment, I thought my car stereo was playing games with me. I looked at the display and it had not moved. The red light still read CD1. What the hell had just happened? Where had that come from? Shaken, I slowed down, pulled over to the side of the road, breathing shakily. Dead by Christmas. What? I looked around me. The sun was still shining. Cars were passing me on the familiar road, and I was halfway home. Nothing strange to see, so why did I feel so frightened? It was as if, in that moment, my reality had somehow shifted or changed. My brain could not make sense of where those words had come from. After what seemed like hours, but on checking my watch was only a few minutes, I pulled myself together enough to resume my journey. Nothing else untoward happened, and by the time I made it back home, I'd almost put it out of my mind. I decided to keep the experience to myself, because maybe I just imagined it. And if I hadn't imagined it, who would believe me in any case? I put it down to the heat of the sun and a trick of the mind. Sorry, I've just seen your comment. I'm trying not to read comments until I've finished, but I'm trying to be authentic as I'm reading and, the stuff there. Right, so I'm going to carry on. My husband had already left for work. An open newspaper on the table with an empty coffee cup next to it. The chair pushed out and abandoned, a familiar sight which both irritated and comforted me at the same time. He was so untidy. I couldn't help but smile, and a rush of love swept through me as I thought about him. I had never met such a kind and decent man in all my life. In fact, I probably had met many, but nice guys did not normally hold any attraction for me. I had a penchant for those of the opposite sex that exuded danger, treated me like shit, and screwed me over without a second thought for anyone but themselves. Selfish, beautiful men were my choice of lover. I could win them over in a second and initially be in control. This never lasted long, and I fell hard and fast. They all had similar traits. I wanted romance, flowers, poetry. What I generally got was great sex, broken dates, and a wounded heart. So when I decided I wanted my current husband, he really stood no chance. None of them did. I won hearts easily. He did put up a bit of a fight at first. Being a local guy and having heard of my fearsome reputation, yes, I had a bad rep in my hometown, which was why I generally sourced my lovers from other areas. The thing is, when you grow up in a small town, everyone knows everyone, and what they don't know, they make up. I had, as I think I've said, been a pain in the arse most of my life. I moved away as soon as I could, but found myself back in later years to look after my elderly mother. Nearly 30 years had passed since I lived in the area, but the people who I'd left behind here still saw me as the hellraiser who had fucked the whole village. I hadn't, but it didn't stop the tongues wagging. Funnily enough, it was the male population of the area that were the worst for rumour spreading, and I soon realised the instigators were my contemporaries, school friends who I'd declined to spend any time between the sheets with. Jealousy? Who knows? But it was a fact that if I ventured into my local pub, the same old faces were there, propping up the same old bar, telling the same old stories. Barely concealed stares and stage whispers carried above the hum of conversation and the clink of glasses. I felt a bit sorry for them. They had to hold on to gossip from our school days. They'd never stepped out their comfort zones or taken a leap of faith. That's not a problem. Who am I to tell anyone how to live their lives? And sometimes I envied them. Familiar faces, same old routine, day in, day out, week in, week out, sometimes. Mostly I shuddered at the concept and felt an immense sense of pride of all that I had managed to achieve thus far. Funny how such narrow-mindedness can cause so much trouble, and stories of my adventures in love seemed to have taken on legendary status. The local gossips had excelled themselves over the years. The whore of Babylon had nothing on my reputation. Initially I found it amusing, but it soon became tiresome. Luckily I had one or two friends from school who had also returned to the homeland, and we gravitated towards each other, safe in the knowledge that we had all actually experienced life out of the county and broadened our horizons. We met once every few weeks to chew the cud, share a nice meal and a few drinks. We were educated women who enjoyed a chance to speak candidly about anything and everything, and knowing that we would not be judged. We spoke frankly and listened without prejudice. We had all turned out just fine, despite our youthful antics. It was on one of these nights out that I became reacquainted with the man who was to become my significant other. He'd been at the bar with his brother when we walked in. I later learned that those gossips from my formative years had warmed him off when he showed an interest. Luckily for me, he had integrity, and his intellect took him above the lower levels of those pathetic human beings. We were on our second bottle of wine by the time I spotted him. Girls, look over there. Who's that? I feel sure I know him from somewhere. The other three ladies who made up our cosy foursome all followed my gaze. Him, the taller one. Yeah, he looks familiar. Not your type though, Kate, my oldest friend Anna replied. I think he was in the year above us at school. Can't remember his name. Anyone? Said Mags, my second oldest friend. I'm going to go and say hello. I started to take a large swig of wine. Kate, no, sit down, please. You don't want to give them like anything more to gossip about. I agree with Steph, said Mags. Me too, Anna agreed. When did you lot become so boring? I shot them a look of disgust and stood up, wobbling slightly. Sit down, you nutter, said Anna, and grabbed hold of my arm. Get off me, no need to be so rough, I shot back at her. Looking at the concern on their faces, I decided for once that maybe they were right. Annoyingly, I sat down with a thud, managing to spill my drink as I collapsed back onto my chair. Bloody hell, Kate, don't be making a show of yourself in front of those knobheads, said Mags. Whatever, I replied sulkily. I was just going to go and say hello and ask his name, that's all. The others glanced at each other and at my pouty face before bursting out with laughter, causing the rest of the pub to stop mid-conversation and look our way. Shh, thought we were supposed to be acting in a proper grown-up manner, I retorted. Oh, Kate, he's looking over now anyway. He managed to get his attention, said Mags. I looked over and saw she was right. The rest of the cronies had resumed their conversations more than ever, and now I knew that I'd once again proved them right. I was a complete slapper. The focus of my attention caught my gaze and winked. I felt myself blush. I don't blush. And I put it down to the alcohol coursing through my veins. Keep it cool, Katie, keep it cool, I told myself, and then blew it all by winking back at him and raising my now empty glass. Despite my fearsome reputation and my friends' opinions that he was not my type, after some careful negotiations we went on a date, and the rest, as they say, is history. Maybe he wasn't my type, and maybe that's just why this time it worked. I'd found my match. Kind, hard-working, generous guy, coupled with a ferocious libido, was exactly what I'd been looking for all my life. He was perfection. Our wedding was intimate, which was the closest family and friends in attendance. We had a rockabilly theme, my dress being full-on 50s style rock and roll, black with red cherries, red and black, sequined. Sorry, the page is stuck. Sequined shoes with a killer 5-inch heel, coupled with his red and black bowling shirt and the reception at an American-themed diner. It summed us up divinely. We were blissfully happy. Why then, just a year later, did fate cruelly step in and systematically strip us of everything we had come to know and love, our lives thrown into turmoil? 7:30. Are we all doing okay? I'm just going to take a break for a sec. I'm just going to have a look through any comments or questions. Sarah, I can actually smell that book through the screen. Am I the only person who does this? Oh, bless you. Joanne, it's tough. It is. I'm going to get emotional when I'm reading because obviously it's very close to my heart. Scared Sarah to death, sorry, but it really scared me when that happened. It was like, whoa, where did that come from? Okay, so we're halfway through. I think we'll carry on. Is that okay, everyone? Are you enjoying it? Are you okay for me to carry on for another half an hour? We've read that much so far. Just drop me some loves. Joe, that's okay. I'm emotional with you, but I love it. Oh, God. Yeah, we've got some loves. Okay. Hi, Kim. You've missed the first bit, my darling, but you'll be able to catch up on replay. It's going to be about an hour, so what I suggest you do is sit down when you've got an hour and just put your feet up, get some nice cuddly blankets and a glass of something, and listen, if you'd like to, of course. The Sand Race, Sunday, the 27th of December, 2015. The preparation that had gone into today's occasion has been second to none. Many weeks have passed since the summer, which is way behind us. We stepped up the training in the autumn, and now winter has come round, and with it the biggest competition of the year for local equestrians and their trusty steeds. A chance to shine and revel in local glory in the Samath, a sprint race on the beach which had been run since the 1960s. The race was inspired by the success of a similar event, which was held yearly just north of Dublin. A young bookie had seen an opportunity of making a few quid out of the crowds it pulled in, and the Samath race had turned into one of those see and be seen at type of events, patronised by high society, celebrities and the rich and powerful. The first year had attracted a few local competitors, but after the inaugural race, word had spread, and the second year had pulled in more than double. He ran it along the same lines as its Irish forefather, with no more than 10 horses in each race. By the time it had reached its 5th year, there were more than 50 entrants, and word had rapidly spread that this was a worthy race to attend. It became as much a part of the racing calendar as any point-to-point race. The exotic name, the Samath, came from his mother, who was of Greek descent and was an expert on Greek mythology. Samath was a Greek goddess of sand beaches, who had, according to legend, been seduced, then ambushed on the beach by a mortal king. To escape his unwanted advances, she transformed herself into a seal. This stretch of beach where the race was run transformed in November and December each year to become the birthing grounds of hundreds of common grey seals. Further along the beach, the protected area became a bombing range for the Ministry of Defence, but in between these areas were desolate, hard, flat sands that stretched away to the north for 10 kilometres, perfect for hosting the Samath, which ran over 6 furlongs. The event was otherwise more commonly and affectionately known as the Sand Race. Although friendly, it was extremely competitive, and to triumph here gave the winner kudos amongst their fellow horsemen. Since hunting with hounds had become illegal, the local hunt had decided to hold the race on Boxing Day. The landed gentry and other redcoats enjoyed showing off their hunters and thoroughbreds, as well as giving them the chance to brag off to their mates about their 6-figure salaries, newest car and last exotic holiday. Spectators came from near and far, and the event had become more and more popular as the years went on. It was a real spectacle, and riders were coded by colour to denote their level of handicap. The ex-huntsmen and their cronies, who competed in their own class, were labelled the Reds. The greens were made up of novice entries, plus the youngest horses allowed to compete. Yellows were riders who came from other countries, and blues were veteran riders over the age of 40. The colour coding worked well, not only for categorising competitors and aiding a fair race, but for the assembled crowd to be able to follow the somewhat chaotic proceedings. As each year went by, the race grew in its popularity. This year had seen its biggest numbers of entries yet. The whole of the beach, excuse me, the whole of the beach had been transformed into an open-air arena. The track was clearly set out, the dunes providing a natural grandstand for spectators. Even though the wind whistled harshly off the North Sea, it hadn't stopped a record turnout. Stalls were set up all along the edge of the dunes: coffee, soup, hot dogs, chips, burgers, all vied for trade alongside the more unusual and expensive pop-up stalls selling anything from tofu to lobster. A large beer tent was full of punters enjoying a Boxing Day tipple, helping to keep the cold at bay. Bookmakers were doing a roaring trade and the atmosphere was one of jovial good nature. Everyday punters rubbing alongside celebrities enjoying their VIP passes and hospitality, lanyards proclaiming their importance but not affording them any better view than the rest of the racegoers. Ebony and I had yet to win, and we certainly didn't move in the same social circles as the Reds and had no desire to join them. They always looked down their upper-class noses at the likes of us, but they couldn't escape the fact that despite our low breeding, we were the ones to watch. And in the last couple of years had risen through the ranks of also-rans, to becoming an impressive third in our category last year. Today I'm buzzing and so is Ebony. Today is the biggest event of our year and we've trained hard for this. The 3 words that had been shouted in my ear on my way home last summer were locked away safely in the back of my mind. Not entirely forgotten, just stored away in my head in a place where I put things that were too painful or just plain weird to waste brain power on. Our intense training has paid off and Ebony is a shining testimony to the work we've both put in. I pat her neck and talk calmly into her ear. We understand each other. Her head is proudly held in the air, ears pricked, listening to my every word, muscles rippling under her glowing black coat. We're not fazed by the competition, we relish it. I've upped my physical training too, since this race is more of a sprint than the usual endurance race we're used to. As such, we've had to develop and change our training to suit. Change the way I train and force myself to go running on the beach. I figure if I'm asking Ebony to do it, then at least I can do is join her. I alternate our routines and a couple of times a week, instead of saddling up, I exchange the bridle for a head collar and run alongside her to try and improve my fitness too. Headphones ever present so I can sing along to my favourite tunes wherever we are. My whole life has been accompanied by music. It invigorates me when I need some encouragement, calms me, makes me cry, makes me sing with the pure joy of being alive. Today's well-chosen playlist was made up of the Eagles, AC/DC, Duran Duran, obviously, many other bands, an eclectic mix, that was for sure. My Own Way by the Duran Boys, their lyrics appeared to fit the day's activities rather well, and I hummed the familiar song whilst undertaking my final preparations before the allotted time for the vet checks. We're well prepared. My family have come along to support me. My husband and children are well used to the interruption of seasonal festivities and they wave excitedly at me from their vantage point on the dunes. Hey there, Kate, ready for the off? Ebony snorts a greeting at Adam before I can answer. He's pulled alongside us and riding Pilgrim, the cob he had purchased that day back in the summer. Pilgrim was a typical black and white coloured horse, rough around the edges but what was known as a good sort. With Adam's training regime, he had come on in leaps and bounds over the last few months. He'd raced in the Samouth last year with his previous owner, finishing midfield, earning him a place in my category. Hey Adam, looks like we're in the same heat then. I gestured at the blue tabards we had been issued with. I think we stand a good chance. The competition doesn't look half as fit as we do. Well, we've had a good year training, I replied. He grinned at me with mischief in his eyes. Think you can beat us then, do you? Have to wait and see, won't we? But we're as ready as we will ever be, that's for sure. We better go to the assembly area. It's the first novice heat and then we're up. I'll follow you if you don't mind, you've got more experience than I have. There were definite undertones in Adam's reply, but I chose to ignore them. Needed to keep my wits about me. Ebony was winding herself up for a fight and it was like being sat on top of a coiled spring. I could feel her muscles tightening up underneath me and she pranced from one leg to another in anticipation. Behave yourself, follow me if you must, then I suggest you try and keep up. There, the gauntlet had been thrown down. This was the closest we would ever get to having intimate relations with each other. We could show our passion and share our joy of racing without having to take our clothes off or using any protection other than the obligatory riding hats and boots. I'll let you take the lead then, but don't get too comfortable up there, Kate. I won't be far behind you. Should we have a little bet then? Are you up for that? Depends what the stakes are. Well, I think a little game of truth or dare when we get back to the yard. How about it? Are you sure you want to go there? Entrance for the blue race. That's the blue race. Please make your way to the start line. The tinny sound of the tannoy announcing our race drowned out my reply and we both tightened our reins and prepared for the tense walk down from the holding area to the start. I glanced behind me and saw my family jumping up and down, waving and cheering. I raised my hand in return and turned my thoughts to the task in hand. There were 10 of us in this heat, 10 horses. the maximum allowed in each race to comply with health and safety. Despite the competitiveness, the event had a good reputation of being run safely, and its track record was one of the best in its field. Any type of racing has its element of danger, and those who partake in it understand the risk but do it anyway for the love of speed. Horsepower is exciting in all its forms, but here on the sand it was back to basics and had an air of inevitability and understanding of the thrill of the ride that dated back many hundreds of years. It was a feeling that was felt in the very soul, fear, suspense, danger and speed that got the adrenaline racing through the bloodstream of horse and rider alike. The sound of hooves pounding the hard, flat sand and the sweet smell of success on everyone's minds. Good luck, I mouthed at Adam as we lined up with the other entrants. Thin tape ran across the starting line, similar to the Grand National but more basic. Competitors ready! The sound of the crowd rose as the starter held up his gun. 3, 2, 1. He fired the gun in the air with a flourish and the race was on. At 6 furlongs, the race was less than a mile and usually took about 90 seconds. What it lacked in length, it made up for in brutality. Each and every competitor was in it to win, and getting a good result here ensured horse and rider had a well-deserved place on the winner trophy, their name recognised in the racing fraternity the world over. Ebony and Pilgrim were neck and neck at half distance, chasing the front runners, pounding along the sand. We were running our own private race, spurring each other on, loving the thrill of competition. Come on, let's show them how it's done. Kate urged Ebony on, and feeling no response to her encouragement, they started to pull away. A friendly rivalry gave way to the urge to be triumphant in their quest for a win. She glanced behind to be sure they were leaving the rest of the field behind, just 2 horses in front, and the winning post fast approaching. Kate, watch out! Kate was in her element, oblivious to Adam's warning shouts, which were lost in the wind. Too late, she spotted the dark figure that had come out of nowhere and stood in the middle of the track. The horses in front had not been so blinkered, and their riders were struggling to keep them under control. The grey horse that had taken the lead swerved dangerously to avoid the figure. The one in second suddenly put its anchors on, leaving Ebony nowhere to go. Too late. The warning. Kate tried to slow Ebony down, but the collision was inevitable. Whilst most of the rest of the racers had seen the carnage ahead unfolding and managed to pull up, Kate was thrown head first over Ebony's neck, and she landed with a thud on the hard sand. Ebony tensed her hindquarters and took flight over her, determined not to put a foot on her beloved owner. Not so the horse behind. The equivalent of a motorway pilot followed. As horse after horse went down, their riders scattered across the beach like a bad game of buckaroo. Kate, no! Adam had managed to steer his horse around the mayhem ahead. He leapt off Pilgrim and ran towards the tiny form of his friend who lay motionless on the ground. Ebony stood next to Kate, nostrils snorting and prancing from leg to leg, eyes on stalks and ready to take flight at any minute. Somebody help me, please, Adam cried as he knelt over Kate's body. Paramedics were on their way. Running from their posts, carrying a stretcher, the crowd had fallen silent. Adam held on to both horses, helplessly looking down at his friend. Kate's body suddenly started twitching involuntarily, arms and legs no longer under her control. Oh no, Kate, come quickly, I think she's fitting. Come on. We'll take it from here, sir, the medic said, kneeling down and pushing Adam to one side. Adam stood with their horses and tried to placate them as he watched. The other competitors had managed to calm their horses down and had made their way back to the start. The spectators looked on in horror and, realising that there had been a horrible accident, stood in reverent silence. Adam looked away as the paramedics worked, and staring into the distance, he noticed a lone figure stood on the edge of the dunes, silhouetted against the winter sun. A sudden chill washed over him, and the wind swirled around him, bringing a sulphuric aroma which engulfed them within its rising vortex. Sand whipped up, stinging his eyes. Ebony and Pilgrim strained and pulled to get away from him. Sir, please go and join the others. Let us get on with treating your friend. The helicopter's about to land. We need to get her to hospital as quickly as we can. I'll take the horses back, but what about her family? They're over there watching. Her husband will want to come with you. No room, I'm afraid. The best thing you can do to help is to take the horses away, let her family know what's happening. We've stabilised her and we're taking her to the nearest spinal unit. Can you do that? Yeah, of course. What shall I tell them? Will she be okay? Sir, please just tell them we're doing all we can. She's in good hands. Now, really, we've got to get some space. Okay, I'll do that. Kate, you hold on. Do you hear me? Hold on. Oh, Jesus, this can't be happening. Adam struggled to calm the two horses down. It took him all his skill to lead them back to the assembly area. TV cameras and reporters who were there to capture the races and broadcast them globally suddenly descended on him. Adam stoically ignored them and made his way through the crowds, leading his highly strung cargo to the relative safety of the competitors' enclosure. Kate's family awaited. Adam felt his heart sink as he approached them, not knowing what to say, but knowing that they needed to hear the facts. Adam, Kate's husband John, arrived out of breath and visibly shaking, flanked by her two daughters. John, let me find some help to get the horses sorted and back to the yard, and I'll drive you all to the hospital they're taking her to. I need to see her. Is she badly hurt? Is she conscious? What the fuck happened? She's in good hands. Give me 5 minutes. I know it's only words, but try not to worry. I'm sure she'll be fine. Adam turned and led their horses away, wondering what would await them when they arrived at the hospital. His heart breaking for them all. He wasn't sure that she would make it, and he had no clue how they would all manage to go on living without her. We'll do the next chapter, the primary level, and then we'll leave it for tonight. We have 10 minutes left, guys. Okay. Adam, John and the girls stood and watched as various hospital staff came and went in and out of the cubicle where Kate had been laid to rest. Hardly a word spoken between them. In stunned silence they watched and waited, hoping, praying for good news to come every time the blue curtain twitched or opened. A hive of activity revealed. No answers forthcoming as the medics prodded, poked, scanned and tested Kate's lifeless form. Half an hour passed, an hour, 2 hours, every second lasting an eternity in the waiting room opposite. I can't stand much more, Adam. Why won't they tell us what's happening? Just let them do what they've got to do, John. We can't disturb them. They're doing everything they can to save her. Silence once more, as the four of them contemplated the unthinkable, each wondering if things would ever be the same again. Suddenly a large man in hospital scrubs appeared from behind the screen. Which one of you's her husband? That's me. Can I come in? What's happening? John got up and started toward him. We've managed to stabilise her, but she's taken an almighty blow to the head. The good news is that all the scans we've done have been positive. No broken bones, nothing untoward, but we won't know for sure until we bring her round just what damage has been done. All we know is that there are no fractures visible. We'll probably keep her sedated for the next 12 hours just to give the painkillers time to do their job and get her through the worst. They all breathed a collective sigh. She was going to be okay. John hugged the girls tightly and they wept with relief. Oh, thank you so much, he breathed in between sobs. Can we go in and see her? Adam asked the doctor. Yes, but only quickly. We just organised a transfer for her to go up to a bed in the intensive care unit. Intensive care? Oh my God, John answered, barely able to speak. Try not to worry too much. We're fairly confident she's just sustained surface injuries. We'll have to wait until the swelling to her head goes down a little before we can properly assess. Until then, she'll be monitored every second and kept under to allow the drugs to do their job. You can come in now, said a young nurse as she drew the curtain back and beckoned them over. She probably looks worse than you were expecting. But as the doctor says, it appears to be mostly superficial. What on earth was she doing? She's covered in sand. Racing a horse on the beach, Adam replied, tears choking his reply. Oh, Katie. John held her hand as best he could in between the tubes which protruded from all over her body. She looks so tiny there, plugged into all that machinery. It's all necessary, I'm afraid. I'll have to ask you to be quick. They're waiting for her upstairs. One by one, they bent over, negotiated the tubes to try and lay a kiss on a free patch of skin. It was all too much for the girls, and they held each other, sobbing as they watched the motionless form of their mother being wheeled away. She's in good hands. Adam tried his best to reassure the family. It was hard to say it with conviction he didn't feel. Kate, can you hear me? The voice in my head was unfamiliar. Who was it? I tried to answer, but there was something blocking my mouth. My hands reached up to remove the obstacle, only to be caught and placed gently down by my right-hand side. Whoever was there with me in the dark had now taken a firm hold of my hand. I tried to respond, but once again was thwarted by tubes, pipes, wires. I didn't know what else. Who are you? I tried to will my thoughts into the head of my companion. No answer. Nothing worked. Couldn't make sense of what was going on around me. I tried to open my eyes, but was unable to do more than a slight flutter. I had the feeling that I'd been asleep for a very long time. My fingers grabbed onto what felt like wet bed sheets covered in some sort of grit. No, not grit. Sand. I struggled to try and remember what had led me there to this blind chaos. Many voices, the sound of machinery, blips of brightness trying to seep through my eyelids, and I had a brief notion that maybe the someone I had heard was just in my head and not a real person. Was I going mad? Didn't know. I didn't know anything. Confusion took over. I had to get up. I had to find Adam. Nothing. Thought, gone again. As much as I tried to chase it, I couldn't hold on to it. Gone again in a split second, and the dark engulfed me once more. John, come on, you've been sat there all night. Please go and get some rest. Caitlin, the elder of the two girls, spoke softly to their stepdad. I can't leave her. What if she wakes up and there's nobody there? They said she's been heavily sedated. Come on, should we just go and get some fresh air? You can't sit here all night. Charlotte took hold of John's hand with a comforting squeeze. Let's let the nurses do their job. She's in safe hands, isn't she? Your daughters are right. It won't do any of you any good sat here just looking at the numbers on the machines all night. She won't be able to respond as we've increased the sedation to help stabilise her overnight. Go and get some rest. If there's any change, we'll come and find you. Adam had spoken to the hospital staff and managed to secure one of the relatives' rooms for the night. It was tiny, with a bed settee and a chair, but it was private and meant that they could at least get a little bit of rest and enabled them to be at hand for Kate. John sighed and stood up wearily. If you promise you'll fetch us if there's any change. Of course. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some checks I need to do on your wife. Just routine, but we monitor very closely on the unit. She's doing okay and holding her own. Thank you for everything you're doing. What time can I come back in the morning? We're staying in one of the relatives' rooms. The doctors do their rounds at 9 o'clock, so if you come at 8:30, you'll be able to have some time with her before they arrive. Come on, John, the girls are right. You look exhausted. You're no good to her in this state. I noticed a coffee shop downstairs. I don't know about you, but I'm ready for a drink. Adam put his arm around his friend's husband. The four of them left the unit and made their way down to the ground floor. If you want to go home, Adam, please do. John took his hand. You've been very kind, but we'll be okay, won't we, girls? I'll stay and have a drink with you, then I better go back. The horses won't see to themselves in the morning. I'll come back tomorrow. Read me if you need anything, bring him. Adam, I'll catch a lift with you. I'll go, then I can come back in my car tomorrow, and if you need anything, I'll bring it. You've been more than kind, Adam, but we'll be okay, Caitlin said firmly. I need to get home and organise the kids. Poor Dave will be tearing his hair out. I'd like to go straight away, please, Adam, if you don't mind. As the elder daughter, she'd always taken the lead. Her and Kate had a tempestuous relationship and often clashed in the past, but they would do anything for each other if need be. Caitlin had grown into a strong woman, had her own business as well as 3-year-old twin boys to keep her busy. John and Charlotte knew better than to disagree with Caitlin. She was like a force of nature once she had made her mind up. Adam looked from one to the other and decided it was best not to interfere with the family dynamics at play. Right then. I'll be sure to ring you tomorrow, John. Try and get some sleep later. I'll try. Thanks for everything. Speak to you tomorrow then. Thank you. Thanks so much. John shook his head and gave Caitlin a swift hug, and they were gone. Shall we get a drink then? I don't really want anything. I don't know what to do, Charles. Charlotte's heart went out to her stepdad. He was such a kind man. The best thing to have happened to her mum in a very long time. They were so blissfully happy. John had been a breath of fresh air and a welcome break from the normal kind of guy her mother brought home. He was a little older than Kate and had had his fair share of accidents in the past, which had left him with a slight limp, hardly noticeable unless he was tired. Tonight he looked 10 years older, and every accident he had suffered in the past now showed up on his weary face. He rubbed his left leg, vaguely aware of a dull ache as they stood in the hospital foyer, watching Caitlin and Adam head off towards the car park. Shall we get that drink then? Can't face anyone, Shal. I think I'd like to go outside. I need to get out of this building and try and clear my head a bit. A blast of icy cold air hit them as they stepped through the automatic doors of the main entrance of the hospital. 1 or 2 hardened smokers, including a guy in a wheelchair, were getting their nicotine fix just outside the doors. Their cigarette smoke following John and Charlotte as they wandered along the slab pathway. Neither of them smoked, and usually John was stressed about selfish people polluting the atmosphere. Passive smoking was the last of his worries tonight, and he didn't bat an eyelid. Can't believe this, Charles. That bloody race. I knew something was going to happen. I had a bad feeling in my gut. Why didn't I stop her going? You weren't to know. Anyway, even if you had asked her not to go, what do you think she would have done? You know what she's like. Nothing would have stopped her going. She'd only have ended up having a strop with you and gone anyway. That race meant too much to her to forfeit her place. I know you're right, but I still can't help blaming myself. I need to find out what happened. What caused those horses to spook so badly? Don't even think about it. We must try and focus on Mum. Should we go in now? Especially in your... Everyone needs support at times like this. Oh, sorry, I went off then. It's back. And we're there for each other, that's the way it is. And I'm pregnant, not poorly. Love you. Love you too. You're right, I can hardly feel my hands for this cold, it's bitter. The wind whipped through their coats, making them shudder as they headed back to the entrance, their breath as heavy on the air, as visible as that of the oxygen polluters. Excuse me, can you help me? Charlotte looked over to the source of the plea. It was the guy in the wheelchair calling to them. He was on his own now, having been abandoned by the other smokers. Both his hands were bandaged and his legs stopped short at the knee. He was wrapped in a blanket and wore a battered trapper hat. I'm stuck, he gestured at his wheels, demonstrating his predicament. They're stuck in between one of the slabs. There's a big crack and I can't move them. Can you give me a push, please? Don't know if you can hear some chatting in the background. I'll just give it a sec. Is everyone all right? We're going to finish. This chapter's literally about 2 more pages long. Just got a quick drink. That's my Nige. He's loud. And I'm thankful for that. Bear with me. Are you still there, guys? Look, 7 of you there. Okay, so where were we? Oh, it's 8:02, so might have to start this chapter again. Not tonight. I'll read to the end in a moment, and then I think we'll read this chapter. We'll start this one again. It's about 6 pages long. The primary level, that's where we are. So they're at the hospital. Kate's in intensive care. Adam and Caitlin have gone home. John and Charlotte are at the hospital. And they're just helping a guy that's stuck. He's still there. Okay, so, right, where were we? Don't even think about it. We must try and focus on Mum. Should we go in now? I'm bloody freezing and it's getting late. It's been a long day. You look like I feel. Charlotte put her arm around John and gave him a hug. Thanks, Char, you're so brave. It should be me comforting you, not the other way round, especially in your condition. Don't be silly, everyone needs support at times like this, and we're there for each other. That's the way it is. And I'm pregnant, not poorly. Love you. Love you too. You're right, I can hardly feel my hands for the cold, it's bitter. The wind whipped through their coats, making them shudder as they headed back to the entrance, their breath as heavy on the air, as visible as that of the oxygen polluters. Excuse me, can you help me? Charlotte looked over to the source of the plea. It was the guy in the wheelchair calling to them. He was on his own now, having been abandoned by the other smokers. Both his hands were bandaged and his legs stopped short at the knee. He was wrapped in a blanket and wore a battered trapper hat. I'm stuck, he gestured at his wheels, demonstrating his predicament. They're stuck in between one of the slabs. There's a big crack and I can't move them. Could you give me a push, please? Of course we can, said Charlotte. Here, let me try, she added, taking hold of the wheelchair handles and setting him free. Would you like us to help you back inside? Yeah, if you don't mind. I feel a bit of a stupid twat, to be honest, but I'm struggling with these fucking bandages. I can just about manage to smoke if someone else lights it for me. Filthy habit, I know, but look at the state of me. I figure I've survived a war zone, so a little nicotine ain't going to be a problem. John could only follow blindly, tears streaming down his face. Tears of sorrow for his beautiful wife, for the man in the wheelchair, tears of pride for his stepdaughter, and tears of regret that he was unable to protect Kate as he should have done that day. Events had taken over and were out of his control, but it didn't stop the guilt. Which floor are you going to? We might as well take you all the way back. John wiped his eyes and caught up with Charlotte and her charge. 7th floor, surgical ward, if that's okay. Cheers, appreciate it. I'm Gary, by the way. Nice to meet you, Gary, said Charlotte. Yeah, you too. How come you're here so late? It's past visiting. Mum's in intensive care. We're staying over, Charlotte replied. Sorry to hear that. That's crap, especially at Christmas, eh? The odd trio travelled the rest of the journey up in silence, each lost in their own world. John studied the injured man and he wondered where he'd sustained his injuries, assuming it was fighting for his country but not knowing or wanting to ask any further information. The faded Help for Heroes t-shirt, the scraggy beard and eyes full of pain prevented John from embarking on a difficult conversation. John was shocked at how he'd misjudged the man, assuming that he was in his 40s. Once he'd seen beyond the injuries, he realised he was probably in his early 20s, the same age as his girls. John wondered how much more misery he could take. He'd had enough sorrow to deal with without taking on the rest of the world's problems. The lift binged their arrival at floor 7, interrupting his painful daydreams. "I'll be okay from here, thanks very much." Gary wheeled himself out of the lift. "If you're sure, okay then. Well, nice to have met you. Merry Christmas," John replied. The irony of his salutations cut through him as bitterly as the ice-cold wind. Charlotte bent over and gave Gary a kiss on the cheek. "Next time you go for a smoke, stay away from broken slabs. You could have frozen to death if we hadn't been there." "Bossy, aren't you?" he replied with a wink. "I'll try and keep out of trouble." "Make sure you do," Charlotte replied with a grin. As the lift doors closed, they watched as Gary wheeled himself to the security door leading into the ward and pressed the intercom. "Are you ready to go back to the relatives' room?" "I think so, I'm exhausted," John replied. "I don't know if I can sleep though. It's going to be a long day tomorrow, and if we're going to get through it, we need to try and rest." "When did you get to be so grown up?" "Today," Charlotte answered, her voice cracking with trying to hold back the tears. The two of them held each other up for support and walked slowly back to the little room that would become home for the next week. Both lost in their own thoughts, both knowing that things would never be the same again. I think we'll leave it there. So, thank you so much for listening. Would you like this again tomorrow evening? Or would you like it once a week? Oh, thank you, Lynn. Thank you. Because if we could do this. Let's see, we've done a few chapters. If we do one a week, we're not going to do it by Christmas. So I think maybe Friday evening. What do you think? Have tomorrow off and do Friday evening. If I do it every other night, then you won't get bored with me. Unless, just give me some ideas, pop in the chat or send me a message or I'll do a poll. That's what I'll do. I'll do a poll and see if you want this every night or every other night. I don't think once a week is going to be enough. We won't get Friday's fab, Lynn, yeah? I don't need to get bored and think, oh, we've got to tune in every bloody night this week. But I don't want to do it weekly either because that's too far. So Friday. Okay, we'll do Friday. If everyone's okay with that, we'll do Friday at 7. But I will pop in group. Thank you so much for your patience and thank you for tomorrow even better. Every second or third night. I think we'll do Friday and we'll do Sunday, if that's okay. I could carry on Sunday after weekly roundup. Yeah. Anything but boring. Oh, bless you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks for your really beautiful comments as well. I really appreciate it. Right, I'm going now. Love you all. Thank you so much for being in the group. Bright blessings, and I will see you Friday at 7. Much love. Bye, guys.